Hello, friends. Welcome. This is a new installment of the much-loved manhwa about Lloyd. Before the video begins, I'd like to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your incredible support in the form of likes and comments. Thank you and enjoy the show. Lloyd stood motionless, his gaze filled with unwavering resolve, ready for the impending battle. The king of hell continued to materialize in the air. He immediately commanded the shards of the malignant spirit to obey his will and attack. Everything around seemed to freeze from the oppressive tension. A gaping portal to the demon world then appeared on the surface of the sun. It seemed one could clearly see hell itself within it. Lloyd knew that a great battle was about to begin, when suddenly his expression changed slightly. He saw a horrific, colossal monster that was beginning to emerge from the portal. The angel, along with the allied demon, immediately prepared for battle, and even the ordinary humans were ready to fight this terrible creature that was slowly entering the human world. It continued its advance from the portal, observed with horror by a vast number of soldiers. The monster seemed calm, but suddenly it began to shriek with all its might, creating a ghastly, bone-chilling sound. Following it, a huge number of similar monsters immediately poured into the human world. Lloyd was clearly unnerved by this gruesome spectacle. True abominations of hell were now present in the human world. The protagonist's people were incredibly frightened by such a sight, while the main hero himself stared straight ahead with a firm and resolute gaze. The monsters looked like something unreal and terrifying. Lloyd closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered seeing these monsters several times in his visions of the future, and that they had inflicted a devastating defeat on his people. He worried if they could win this time, as the casualties back then had been incredibly high. The protagonist thought that now was the time to use the surprise they had prepared. Lloyd knew that after these monsters, the king of hell himself would be next. He remembered that even a grand master had lost to this powerful being. The protagonist was noticeably worried about the outcome of this battle. Xavier immediately asked his master to quickly grant him the baptism of the Demon King. But Lloyd suddenly began to move, which immediately sent Xavier into a state of deep shock. It seemed even the imperturbable king of hell was surprised by what was happening. Lloyd fell to his knees and, looking at the ground, immediately began to declare that he was surrendering. He asked to be taken away and for the attacks on these lands to cease. Xavier could not understand what his master was doing, as he was so needed by all these people. Lloyd, however, believed that if he disappeared, the rest of the people could continue to live in peace. The king of hell looked down upon the main hero. He stated that he had come to this place to fulfill Yusrad's wish, and it would not come true if Lloyd simply died. Lloyd froze in place for a moment, until the Lord of the Underworld added that the man's wish was for everyone to understand that the horror and pain they were feeling was all Lloyd's fault. He listened as the king of hell declared that he would kill everyone in this place. This declaration immediately sparked a flash of fury in the main hero. He began to scream with all his might, after which he announced that they were commencing the operation to achieve victory, and asked everyone to listen carefully and not ask unnecessary questions. Xavier began to smile, seeing his master in such a state. Lloyd immediately shouted for all the people to retreat. He yelled that they needed to run to the town square with all their might. The main hero ordered the angel and the demon queen to head to the rear, and without question, they rushed to carry out their master's command. The king of hell guessed that this was some kind of diversion, because if Lloyd sent the people to the square, he wouldn't be able to use the holy water from the lake. The monsters moved at great speed. Xavier reported that their army would soon be overtaken, as these creatures were incredibly fast. Lloyd shouted that they would stop them. He immediately ordered his pets to run after the main army, while he and Xavier stopped. They were immediately joined by the angel and the demon queen. The monsters continued to rapidly approach the group, until Lloyd yelled that they needed to attack to slow the enemies down. The angel immediately readied his sacred hammer. The demon queen was also fully armed, and Xavier prepared to swing his blade. The king of hell was amazed at how Lloyd's people trusted his improvised command without any doubt. The heroes attacked with all their might. Their combined attack moved toward the monsters, under the king of hell's commentary that Lloyd was indeed a strong being, but still not strong enough. Xavier's attack did absolutely no harm to the monster. Another easily stopped the angel's hammer, and the demon queen's threads were completely ineffective. Lloyd's own attack, meanwhile, moved toward the king of hell at great speed, but it too was easily blocked. Lloyd looked as if he had anticipated this outcome. He immediately shouted Xavier's name, after which he began the process of the baptism of the demon king. The king of hell remembered that Lloyd possessed this unique power and wondered with interest just how far this battle would go. Xavier, along with the main hero, were ready for the second round, now with new, multiplied strength. Lloyd shouted that it was time to begin, after which Xavier immediately rushed from his spot. In a single instant, he was right in front of the monsters and readied his blade to strike. Xavier concentrated a huge amount of power, after which he immediately attacked with all his might. For a moment after his attack, there were no consequences, but then the bodies of the monsters were instantly sliced into tiny pieces. Lloyd was pleased, thinking that this was to be expected from the main hero of this world. He immediately began to shout for Greg to prepare that thing, while one of the monsters attacked Xavier, who incredibly deftly dodged its every blow. Xavier tore the opponent's body apart with his blade, when suddenly another enemy appeared behind him and managed to successfully strike the young knight's body. However, Xavier did not lose consciousness and grabbed the creature by its head. He immediately shattered the shard of darkness with a powerful swing of his sword. Another, incredibly strong opponent appeared. Xavier attacked it with all his might. He continued his furious battles at this pace. It seemed he was fighting at the very limit of his capabilities, but he had no intention of stopping. Soon, Xavier was surrounded by a huge number of enemies, when suddenly Lloyd began to shout, calling out to the knight, and then ordered him to retreat as quickly as possible. Without a second's thought, Xavier began to retreat from the vast number of enemies. He moved at an unimaginable speed and was incredibly quickly behind the protagonist. Lloyd, along with his men, stood their ground with their weapons proudly raised. The main hero immediately gave the order to open fire, and Lloyd's new weapon was brought onto the battlefield. It immediately launched a huge volley of rockets that began to fly toward the enemies. The king of hell couldn't understand what was happening, as the trajectory of this weapon was very strange. It seemed the man had noticed something interesting. All the rockets were moving toward the mountain. The king of hell seemed to understand Lloyd's plan, amazed that they had decided to go to such lengths. An incredibly powerful explosion immediately rocked the area. Shards of the mountain began to fly off, and water rushed toward the battlefield with incredible force. The king of hell understood perfectly that they had turned all the water in the lake into holy water, but surprisingly, he was only glad that this had happened. Looking at Lloyd's face, he thought that the boy had no idea what this would ultimately lead to. Lloyd ordered the demon queen to act. She immediately plunged her hand into the concrete, and a moment later, a huge wall appeared, thanks to which they managed to block part of the water directed their way. Lloyd looked incredibly grim at that moment. He remembered the past, where he had worked so hard, remembered the joyful people who were happy with their warm buildings, and in the present, all of it was being washed away by powerful streams of water. He remembered the road they had built with great effort and saw it being mercilessly washed away by the water right now. Literally all the buildings in this place were suffering from the water. The surrounding area was quickly being consumed by the liquid, while Lloyd, and for that matter Xavier, looked incredibly grim. The holy water fell upon the bodies of the monsters, and they began to howl from the unbearable pain they felt. The entire area was covered in water. The cocoon that the demon queen had created was intact. It began to slowly open, and Lloyd was immediately ready to strike. The main hero roared with anger, then directed his attack at one of the weakened enemies. The opponent's body was torn to pieces. It seemed they had become much weaker now. The monster lay lifelessly on the water, while Lloyd stood silently for a moment, after which he addressed all his people. With a crazed expression on his face, he ordered everyone to counterattack. The squad of elves was ready to release a volley of arrows, and a moment later, a huge number of projectiles flew into the air. The arrows struck the bodies of the monsters, and they howled from the pain they felt. The humans raised their shields, expecting an attack from one of the monsters. One man shouted that they were the White Knights, who pursued profit and were loyal subjects of Lloyd. The enemy prepared to attack the knights, while they readied themselves to defend against the blow. The knights held back the monster's assault, while their captain ordered the swordsmen to act. They immediately began to attack the creature's body. The orcs also fought fiercely against these monsters. However, there was a truly huge number of them, and they were bombarding the area where Lloyd's people were. The protagonist's dragon appeared on the battlefield, immediately preparing to attack, and in a single instant, it struck down the long-range monsters. The demon also fought fiercely on Lloyd's side, and other demons fought for victory as well. The great battle continued at a rapid pace. Flower petals appeared in the surrounding space and began to move. It turned out these were Lloyd's pets, who were also fighting fiercely for their master. The great battle raged on as if it had no intention of slowing down. Meanwhile, the King of Hell hovered in the air. He watched the events unfold intently. He looked at his hand, guessing that everything was about 30% ready. The King of Hell adjusted his clothes, thinking that this should be enough. He addressed Lloyd, calling him a cool guy. He stated that the protagonist was a man who could conquer the entire human world at any moment. But the King of Hell noted that Lloyd always used his power for those around him. Lloyd stared intently at the King of Hell, who was now declaring with a crazed look that it was for these very reasons that he wanted to possess Lloyd for himself. The King of Hell could only hope that they could sympathize with his love, while the protagonist's allies were already in front of him, ready for the coming battle. Xavier found this incredibly disgusting and believed that if a man was rejected, he should back off. The King of Hell, however, claimed that what he was doing was a manifestation of sincerity. Xavier immediately attacked, but the man easily dodged. The Demon Queen also joined the battle. Her threads approached the enemy at great speed, who began to move with incredible velocity and thus managed to avoid being captured by this technique. Suddenly, the King of Hell received an incredibly heavy blow directly to his head. It turned out to be the angel, who had chosen the perfect moment to strike. Due to the shock, the King of Hell was caught in the girl's attack, and Xavier prepared to finish off the immobilized bastard. However, the King of Hell easily tore the girl's threads and just as easily stopped Xavier's advance. Xavier's attack literally destroyed entire mountains behind the King of Hell. The man mockingly suggested that if Xavier had actually hit him, they might have even won. But suddenly, the knight attacked the bastard with his forehead. The angel also struck the enemy with his hammer. The Demon Queen was also preparing an attack, while the man himself prepared to block it with his hand. The girl's attack split into several smaller ones. They immediately surrounded the King of Hell, who seemed not to know what to do. In the end, the man was trapped, while Xavier had already charged his most powerful attack. He attacked with all his might, but the King of Hell managed to escape from captivity, though it seemed he had not expected such power from the knight. An incredibly fast and powerful attack approached the bastard at immense speed. Mere centimeters remained before impact, and in the end, he took a devastating blow directly to his torso. This attack could be seen from literally every corner of the battlefield. Lloyd believed that their fighting style was completely different from the past, as, in the end, all their elite forces were focused on the King of Hell, who was at that very moment screaming in pain. A massive explosion erupted, from which even Lloyd had to shield himself with his arm. A huge hole formed at the point of impact. Xavier moved at incredible speed, intending to finish off the enemy, who was now lying on the ground, showing no emotion. He then stated something about 40%. Xavier seemed to be amazed by something. The crater was empty, and the enemy was nowhere to be seen. It turned out that the King of Hell had, in an instant, appeared behind Xavier and was holding his allies by the throat. Xavier immediately began to turn, but the King of Hell flew past him, then landed on the ground, shattering it. The King of Hell prepared to strike with his fist. He immediately attacked the girl with all his might. He continued to strike with his feet. This sight made Lloyd nervous for his people. The King of Hell stood over the bodies of the angel and the Demon Queen. Xavier appeared behind him. The man began to slowly turn toward him, after which he stated something about 50%. This made Xavier worry about what was going to happen next. A huge thank you for watching this video to the end. If you enjoyed the video, please write your opinion in the comments below, as it can speed up the release of the next part. Once again, thank you all for watching, and see you soon.